Hey guys, I'm Keyana. Welcome back to my channel and happy Black History Month. Today I'm going to be talking about something that is one of my favorite pastimes, something that I really love, and that is reading and books. As I've gotten older, whenever I do take the time to pick up a book, it is more than likely a book for, by, or about Black people. As a Black woman, I think it's important to read books by and about and for Black people. So, because it's Black History Month, I figured I would share a couple books that I think are relevant to the current world issues, US issues, just things that affect everyone, as well as books that are by, for, and about Black people. So there are 8 books, 2 of which are actually not by Black people, but again, I think they're relevant and I think they are relatable. And I'm not saying you have to read all of them because I'm definitely not going to read all 8 this month. And I don't expect you to either unless you're like a superhero. So let's get started. Alright, so the first book is actually not a book that I have with me physically. It is a book that I listen to on Audible. This is not a sponsored video unless Audible wants to call me, in which case we can make all the sponsored videos you want because I love to read and I love Audible. So Audible, hit my DMs. In all seriousness, the first book that I'm going to recommend is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is an alum, I don't know, of Howard University, just like me. This book was literally everywhere. Everyone was talking about this book last year, and I didn't have time. I didn't get around to reading it last year when it was like really hot and really popular. I was busy, you know, trying to graduate and like not have a mental breakdown. I finally got my hands on it via Audible. I listened to it, and the whole book is like 3 hours on Audible, and it is so good. A quick synopsis: basically he is the person that the book is directed to, the audience the book is directed to. I thought it was just a beautiful way to direct his narrative throughout the book, and the topics that he discusses are so relevant and so like they hit home. You know, I'm listening to the book and I'm like, oh shit, like that, understanding exactly what he felt in this moment. Literally everything about that book clicks to me in a way that's rare when you read a book. And I wish I could tell you more about what the book is about, but it's hard to explain without spoiling the book. It's just something that you have to pick up. You have to read it. You have to listen to it. However you consume this book, you have to do it. It really like touched my heart and my spirit, and it felt good. It's almost like sitting down and just talking to like one of your uncles or your cousins or your brother or your dad, and just like listening to them tell you an important life lesson, if that makes sense. Okay, so the next book is The Racial Contract by Charles W. Mills. Looks like this, and this book was recommended to me by a PhD student and professor at Howard University who is like one of the most intelligent men I've ever met in my entire life. And he was basically telling me that if I want to understand society and race in society, I gotta read this book. I will preface this and say I have not read this book yet. This is just based off the synopsis that I have from our conversation and from reviews that I've read, but it's definitely at the top of my list of books to read. Back in like high school in US or world history or social studies or something, we learned about the social contract and how during the Enlightened Age or the Enlightenment Revolution thing, all these philosophers were discussing and writing treaties and how to form governments and how government should interact with people, and these documents and theories became known as a social contract. It's a theoretical contract for how people interact with one another and how people interact with their governments and how all of that shapes and creates a well-rounded society, right? But what the social contract doesn't address is race. Charles Mills goes in and explains and explores how within the context of the social contract, how race changes and adapts all of that. In the context of the social contract, when you add in race, in order to maintain order and structure, there has to be exploitation, dominance, violence. There have to be these violent and exploitative and destructive behaviors in order to enforce the power structure that has been created through the social contract via race. I definitely think that in an effort to understand where we are in our country right now, and in order to effectively build plans to break down or change or shift the way this country works, we've got to understand how and why it was built this way, which is why I recommend reading The Racial Contract. The next book that I'm going to recommend is How to Be Black by Baratunde Thurston. This book, man, this book is so good. I was gifted this book on my 18th birthday, and I was very offended. Throughout all of my life, I've been told that I'm not black enough, that I act white, that I'm an Oreo, that I talk too white, and I hated that so much. So on my 18th birthday, when I opened up, sorry, there's someone like slow rolling past my house right now in a dark truck. When I was gifted this book on my 18th birthday by someone very close to me, so when I was given this book by someone close to me, I was like, what? That's so rude. Why would you say that about me? But then I read it, and it's so good and so funny. As you read the book and as you dive into these chapters that are called things like how to be the next black president, how to be the black friend, how to celebrate Black History Month, as you dive into it, you realize it's more like satirical wisdom and not a self-deprecating joke. I think it's a really good read for right now, especially for young adults. It's kind of difficult to navigate these all white spaces. How do you deal with Becky from Human Resources or Tom from Finance without coming off as the angry black woman? And in a very smart and intelligent way, this book kind of like guides you through that bullshit. All right, book number 3 is a book that is very close to my heart. I have started reading it but not finished because I have like ADD when it comes to books. I'll pick up a book and read 2 chapters and then see another book. I have a feeling it's going to be one of the best books I've ever read. The book is Push Out by Monique Morris. The subtitle is The Criminalization of Black Girls in School. I picked this book up in Busboys and Poets last spring because I felt this was personal to me. I was a black girl in all white schools with all white friends who, you know, laughed a lot and talked a lot, but for the most part was a very sweet girl. I didn't really bother people. If I had drama, it wasn't like violence and me being aggressive. It was just like dumb kid drama with my friend groups. And so it always baffled me when people would tell me that I was aggressive or a bully or ghetto or rude. Just all of these microaggressions that would get thrown at me all the time as a kid. It blew my mind how I would get in-school suspension for refusing to give up my phone to a teacher when every single other white kid in the classroom had their phone out. She just wanted mine. No one got in trouble with me. It blew my mind how white kids could say really racist shit, but I would get detention for calling them out on being racist. And so when I saw this book, I felt personally drawn to it. And throughout the book, Monique talks about how black girls are treated like criminals in school. We have the highest rates of suspension. So yeah, this book breaks down the cultural beliefs, policies, and practices that pretty much like make black girls out to be criminals and less than their white female counterparts. All of this stuff that happens to us as little black girls and that we see happening to other black girls in the public education system. I was reading the first chapter and I was thinking back like, yo, even though I didn't have it that bad, I dead ass was treated like I had no right to be in that space. The fact that Monique took the time to write this book that really like dives into why that is, why black girls have the highest rate of suspension, why so many black girls drop out, why so many black girls are viewed as instigators and troublemakers in their classrooms when really they just want to be there and learn like everyone else, and how their white teachers make it worse. Bro. When I finish reading the book, this is the first book I'm going to read after I finish the one I'm on right now, and I'll be doing a full review of my thoughts and opinions about this when I finish. Book number 5 is something a little bit lighter and more fun. It's an easy read and it's by one of my absolute favorite authors, and it is The Ways of White Folks by Langston Hughes. I don't remember how old I was when I first read A Dream Deferred, but I fell in love with Langston Hughes. Honestly, if anyone wants to buy me the complete works of Langston Hughes for my birthday, like, I will love you. I'll bake you brownies and mail them to you, whatever you want. This book is a collection of short stories, very simply put, about the ways of white folk. About the way that white people and black people interact. Once again, it is short stories. They are fiction. They are not real. But when you're reading it, I guarantee you'll be like, that sounds like something I heard on the news. That sounds like something my grandma told me happened to her cousin. That sounds like something that happened to me. Like, you will read this and be like, Langston, are you sure this is fiction? Because this sounds realistic. For example, there's a story about a black man who is an acclaimed musician. I think he was a violinist. He had all of this notoriety over in Europe, and very much so in the way of like Josephine Baker and James Baldwin, who got their fame in Europe and then came back to a very racist America. So in the story, the man comes back to his hometown because he's ill and he wants to see his family one last time, and he ends up getting murdered by a gang of white men. And it's very Emmett Till. This man was just being, and now he's dead. So yeah, it is 14 short stories, probably like 10 pages each, about how awful and sadistic and exploitative white people, some white people, historically racist and misogynistic and discriminatory white people can be and have been and still are. This is another book that I have not yet read, but I have heard amazing things about it. It was also recommended to me by a friend who is a professor. He's not even a PhD student anymore. He has his PhD, so shout out to him. He's never gonna see this. Black Resistance, White Law by Mary Frances Berry. And the subtitle of the book is A History of Constitutional Racism in America. From what I know of the book, it is about, she explores the structures of white supremacy, of white control, of dominance and power, and from slavery to Jim Crow to segregation to the police to the prisons pipeline, like everything from slavery, from the second we got here, to modern history in terms of how we have been controlled and the power we've been subject to. We're in a time where we're seeing heightened amounts of black resistance and white law. I mean, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Terrence Crutcher, Sandra Bland. Shit, just this week there was a man in France who was baton raped by a police officer. If we want to make a change, we got to figure out, we got to break down what created those systems and why they were created and how, and really understand like the logic and the psyche and the connection to all of it before we can even begin to like break it apart. These last two books, like I said earlier in the video, are not by black authors, and they're not necessarily for or about black people, but the conversation is relevant and relatable. Book number 7 is Blueprint for Revolution: How to Use Rice Pudding, Lego Men, and Other Nonviolent Techniques to Galvanize Communities, Overthrow Dictators, or Simply Change the World, by Srdja Popovic. This is another book that I haven't read. It was given to me as a present a few years back. But considering the fact that the world is in kind of like this pre-revolutionary phase where everyone is fired up and everyone is ready to just like flip shit because fascism is on the rise, neo-Nazism is on the rise, white nationalism is on the rise, everyone is like fighting back against these oppressive systems. So I feel like now more than ever is a really good time to read this book. I'm going to read the back of it to you. A handbook for anyone who wants to effectively and peacefully improve your neighborhood, make a difference in your community, or change the world. Blueprint for Revolution will teach you how to make oppression backfire by playing your opponent's strongest card against them, Identify the almighty pillars of power in order to shift the balance of control. Recognize your allies and view your enemies as potential partners. Use humor to make yourself heard, diffuse potentially violent situations, and laugh your way to victory. It sounds like a pretty light read, a light take on some really serious shit. So the last book I'm going to suggest is a book that I'm currently listening to, again on Audible, and that is In the Country We Love by Diane Guerrero. You may know Diane Guerrero as Maritza from Orange is the New Black, or Lena from Jane the Virgin. This book is about her story. Her parents were immigrants from Colombia, and when she was 14 they were deported. So she details her story from then until now and how it shaped her life and shaped her as a human being, and the struggles that came with being the child of undocumented immigrants. And considering the conversation in the world, in this country, regarding immigration, I think that everyone could stand to hear from the perspective of someone who's dealt with deportation and having their family split apart. So guys, that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave me a thumbs up and comment down below if you've read any of these books or if you're gonna read any of these books. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your takes, your suggestions of other books that I should read, and I will see you in the next video.